A Study in Scarlet. Chapter 4. What John Rance Had to Tell. It was 1 o'clock when we left number 3, Lauriston Gardens. Sherlock Holmes took me to the nearest place to send a telegram, where he sent a long message. Then he hailed a taxi, asking the driver to take us to the address given by Lestrade. "There's nothing better than seeing things for yourself," he said. "Actually, I have already made up my mind about the case, but we might as well gather all the information we can." "You surprise me, Holmes," I said. "Surely you can't be as certain as you seem about all those details you mentioned." "There's no chance I'm wrong," he replied. "The first thing I noticed when we got there was that a cab had left 2 wheel tracks close to the sidewalk. Since it hasn't rained in a week until last night, those tracks must have been made during the night. We also saw horse hoof prints, and one was more clear than the others, showing it was a new shoe. Since the cab was there after it started raining and wasn't there in the morning, I have Gregson's word for that. It means it must have brought those 2 people to the house that night." "That sounds straightforward," I said. "But what about the other man's height?" "Well, you can usually guess a man's height by how long his steps are. It's an easy thing to figure out, although I won't bore you with the math. I measured his step outside on the clay and inside on the dust. Then I had a way to check my calculations. When a person writes on a wall, they usually write at eye level. The writing was just over 6 feet from the ground. It was very easy to figure out." "And his age?" I asked. "If a man can step over 4.5 feet easily, he's not very old. That was the width of a puddle on the garden path he had crossed. One person had walked around it and another had jumped over. There's no big mystery here. I'm just using some observation and deduction techniques in real life, like those I talked about in an article. Is there anything else you're wondering about?" "The fingernails and the trichinopoly," I suggested. "The message on the wall was written with a man's finger dipped in blood. I noticed the plaster was scratched, which wouldn't happen if the man's nails were short. I also found some ash on the floor, dark and flaky, the kind you get from a trichinopoly cigar. I've studied different types of cigar ash. In fact, I've written a paper on it. I believe I can identify the ash from any cigar or tobacco. It's these small details that set a good detective apart from the rest." "And the red-faced man?" I asked. "Ah, that was a bit more of a guess, but I'm quite sure I'm right. You can't ask me more about that now." I rubbed my forehead, feeling overwhelmed. "My head is spinning," I said. "The more you think about it, the more confusing it gets. How did these 2 men get into an empty house, if there were indeed 2 men? What happened to the cab driver who brought them? How could one man force another to take poison? Where did the blood come from? Why did the killer do it, if not for theft? How did the woman's ring end up there? And why write the German word Reich before leaving? I just can't see how all these pieces fit together." Holmes looked pleased with my summary. "You've neatly outlined the challenges," he said. "Much remains unclear, though I've formed a clear opinion on the main issues. As for Lestrade's finding, it was a trick to mislead the police, suggesting political motives which don't exist. It wasn't done by a German. Notice the A's shape, made to look German but not quite right. A real German uses Latin characters, so this was likely someone pretending and overdoing it. It's a distraction, nothing more. I won't reveal much more about the case. If I explain how I work, you might start thinking I'm just an ordinary person." "I'll never think that," I responded. "You've made detective work almost an exact science." Holmes seemed truly happy with my praise. I noticed he enjoyed being complimented on his detective skills as much as anyone would on their appearance. "I'll tell you something else," he continued. The two men arrived in the same cab and seemed friendly, probably walking arm in arm. Inside, one stayed still while the other paced back and forth, getting more agitated as he moved. That's what the dust tells me. Then, the tragic event happened. That's all I know for sure. The rest is guesswork. But it's a solid start. We must hurry. I've got plans this afternoon. Our conversation happened while our cab navigated through bleak streets. Eventually, our driver stopped in a particularly grim area. "That's Audley Court." He pointed to a narrow entrance between dull brick buildings. "I'll wait for you here." Audley Court was far from welcoming. We moved past dirty children and grimy clothes hung to dry, reaching number 46. The door bore a brass plate with "Rants" engraved on it. We were told the constable was sleeping but were led to a small room to wait. He soon appeared, looking annoyed at being woken up. "I've already made my report," he said. Holmes took out a coin, playing with it thoughtfully. "We'd like to hear the story directly from you," he told him. "I'd be very happy to share everything I know," the constable replied, his gaze fixed on the small golden coin. "Just tell us the story in your own words, as it happened," we encouraged him. Rance settled onto the stiff sofa, furrowing his brow in concentration, eager to leave nothing out. "I'll start from the beginning," he began. "My shift is from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. By 11 there was a bit of a scuffle at the White Hart, but besides that, everything was quiet until the early hours. Around 1 o'clock, it started to rain, and I met Harry Murcher from the next beat. We chatted at the corner of Henrietta Street for a bit. Around 2, or maybe a bit later, I decided to patrol down Brixton Road. It was dark, lonely, and a bit muddy. I didn't see anyone, though a few cabs passed by. As I was walking, thinking about how nice a warm drink would be, I noticed a light in a window of one of the empty houses in Lauriston Gardens. Knowing those houses were supposed to be empty, I felt something was off. When I approached the door, "You stopped, then headed back to the garden gate," Holmes interjected. "Why did that?" Rance jumped, surprised. "That's exactly what happened, sir, though how you knew is beyond me. The place was so quiet and eerie, I thought I'd feel better with someone by my side. I wasn't scared, but the thought of the typhoid victim might be haunting the place spooked me. I went back to the gate hoping to find Murcher, but he was nowhere in sight." "There was nobody around?" Holmes pressed. "Not a soul, sir, not even a dog. Then I gathered my courage, went back, and pushed the door open. It was silent inside, so I entered the room where the light was. There was a candle flickering on the mantel, and by its light I saw— Yes, I know what you found. You circled the room a few times, knelt by the body, tried the kitchen door, and then—" Rance stood abruptly, his face filled with fear and suspicion. "Where were you hiding to see all that?" he demanded. "It seems you know too much." Holmes chuckled and tossed his card to Rance. "Don't worry about arresting me. I'm one of the good guys. Gregson or Lestrade can vouch for me. Please continue. What did you do next?" Rance sat down again, still puzzled. "I went back to the gate and blew my whistle, which brought Murcher and 2 others. And the street was empty then." "As far as anyone useful was concerned, yes." "What do you mean?" Rance grinned. "I've dealt with many drunk people, but I've never seen anyone as drunk as this fellow. He was by the gate, leaning against it, singing loudly about something nonsensical. He could barely stand. "What did he look like?" Holmes inquired. Rance seemed annoyed by the question. "He was very drunk," he replied. "If we weren't so busy, he'd have been in the station." "Did you notice his face? His clothes?" Holmes asked, growing impatient. Of course, I noticed them, since Murcher and I had to prop him up. He was tall, with a red face, and his lower face was covered. "That's enough," Holmes cut in. "What happened to him?" "We had our hands full without keeping track of him," Rance said, sounding a bit upset. "I'm sure he found his way home." "How was he dressed?" "In a brown overcoat." "Did he have a whip?" "No, he didn't have a whip." "He must have forgotten it," my friend murmured. "Did you notice a cab after that?" "No." "Here's a little reward for you," my friend said, getting up and reaching for his hat. "I'm afraid, Rance, that you might not get far in your job. You should use your head for more than just wearing your hat. You could have earned your promotion last night. The man you interacted with is key to solving this puzzle, and he's the one we're searching for. No point arguing now. I'm telling you, it's true. Let's go, Doctor." We left together, heading back to our cab, leaving our source looking surprised and somewhat uneasy. "The foolish man," Holmes grumbled as we headed home. "Imagine having such a stroke of luck and not using it." "I'm still a bit confused," I admitted. "The description matches your theory of the second man involved. But why would he return to the house after leaving? That's not common for criminals." "The ring, my friend. The ring. He came back for it. If we can't catch him any other way, we can lure him with the ring. I assure you, Doctor, I'll catch him. I bet you 2 to 1 that I will. I owe you thanks for all of this. Without you, I might have missed out on this fascinating case. A study in Scarlet, indeed." Why not use a bit of artistic language? There's a red thread of murder woven through the dull fabric of life, and it's our job to trace it, isolate it, and expose every part of it. Now let's have lunch, and then off to see Norman Neruda. Her technique and passion are remarkable, and that piece by Chopin she plays so wonderfully, tra-la-la-lira, lira, lay. As we rode back in the cab, my companion sang joyfully, while I pondered the complexity of the human mind.
English Storyteller JB. Like and subscribe.